The Premed Year, session number 243. Hello and welcome to the 3-time Academy Award-nominated podcast, The Premed Years, where we believe that collaboration, not competition, is key to your success. I'm your host, Dr. Ryan Gray, and in this podcast, we share with you stories, encouragement, and information that you need to know to help guide you on your path to becoming a physician. Welcome to The Premed Years. Today, I am actually, as we're recording this audio version, I'm doing a Facebook Live with my lovely co-host, Allison.
Hello.
Hello. You used to say hello, everybody.
Hello, everybody.
You said it a different way before. That's okay. Welcome back, Allison.
Thank you.
The hashtag Bring Allison Back is working.
I love that. I'm going to get a bumper sticker for that.
I think it was trending in our zip code only.
Okay.
Only in our zip code. You can drill down where it trends. But that's okay. So welcome.
Thank you.
Today we're going to talk about something a little personal, but very important in the grand scheme of the medical world, in the pre-med world, and that's burnout. Now, I've talked to a burnout expert before. I had him on a long time ago, the Happy MD. I forget his name. Anyway, I should have known that. But I had him on a long time ago, and we went through some breathing exercises and some other things. But I wanted to talk from a personal standpoint, what you experienced, what we experienced together, going through that, and then how we can transition that and help students through whatever they may be going through.
Sounds good.
Sounds good. So you were in your residency, neurology residency, which apparently isn't very easy.
No, not where I was, at least.
Yeah. So you were at Mass General.
Mm-hmm. Great program, great experience, just kind of crazy.
Big academic medical center.
Mm-hmm.
And and we were living apart.
Yeah, that was kind of a downer.
might have been part of the reason. I don't know.
Just a little bit, you know.
Yeah.
You get married, and then 2 months later, the Air Force calls, and they're like, yep, you're moving without your wife.
Yeah. So anyway, you're in your residency. How much were you working during residency? Like, what did that look like, hours-wise, days-wise?
A lot. So on the books, 80 hours a week.
Nobody lied when they filled out those time cards, right?
No comment. So yes, about 80 hours a week.
About?
A lot.
Roughly.
A lot. And we were on call so I did my year of internship, and then the following year was my first year of neurology residency, and I was on call every fourth night for about 32 hours. So it was pretty crazy. It was very intense. And very, very sick people, just intense. Really, really crazy.
What do you remember about days off?
Sleeping.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sleeping, eating.
So not much you time?
No, not at all.
Which apparently is important.
Yeah, exercise, eating well. Yeah, those things are kind of important. Those were on the back burner.
At what point did you realize during residency that something wasn't right?
I actually just felt like I was starting to have trouble concentrating, and it was really disturbing because I've always relied on my brain, and I felt like all of a sudden I wasn't concentrating well. I felt like I couldn't rely on my brain, which is really bothersome and disturbing.
Trouble concentrating.
Yeah.
In practice, what did that
look like?
I'd
be at work, and I would be like having trouble like getting my work done, and it wasn't bad enough that it was apparent to anybody else, but to me, who was used to being very efficient and very good at getting things done quickly, I felt like I was like moving like a tortoise. I was just felt really slow. And I wasn't on a really busy rotation at that point. It was further into the year. But I just felt, I don't know, I just didn't feel like myself. I felt like I couldn't recognize myself in the mirror.
Interesting.
And I was really down, super down. Depressed.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, not diagnosed as being depressed, but definitely looking back, for sure.
all those DSM criteria. Yep.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
When in your training was this?
This was my first year of neurology residency, so it was my second year of residency as a whole.
Second year of
residency.
residency.
Second of 4. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So just a reminder, if you're listening to this and wondering what those words are. So first year was a prelim medicine year.
Right, which is your internship. And it's funny because that's always touted as being like the most insane year where you work the most hours. But in comparison, my first year of neurology was 100 times busier.
Yeah. Okay. So first year of neurology, how many months in were you? Do you remember, roughly?
Oh, dear. It was sometime in the winter, so I want to say around February.
So 7-8 months in?
Yeah, it was about February, so yeah.
Okay, so not long.
Well, I mean, into the entirety of my neurology residency, no. In that year, yeah. I mean, the first part of the year was just filled with excitement. I was just super excited to be there. And
Nerd.
then... well, it's what you're working toward, and you finally are there. It's like, yeah. And then...
Nerd.
And then I was getting just into the groove of things because at the beginning it's just like you don't know anything and you're having to learn everything. And so then you sort of hit your stride and I was feeling like I was learning something and I knew something. And then it just starts to eat at you, I think, at least how I felt. And so, yes, it was, I guess, month 7 of that, right?
Yeah.
And I was just tired, and I was living in Boston, and it was cold, and I was feeling like I was working all the time. And
well, you were.
Yeah.
you didn't feel like you were working all the time. You were working all the time.
I had no work-life balance. I was also back living with my parents after I had recently got married, which was very hard. And I didn't really, Ryan was busy. He was in the Air Force. He was up to his own stuff. And I really didn't want to. I
was busy starting a podcast.
Yeah. Well, that too, right? But I didn't want to burden you with what I was dealing with. And so we would get on the phone and we would talk, and I would just sort of, like, oh yeah, everything's fine,
So you didn't have an outlet?
I mean, I would talk to my parents, but it's hard because my friends in residency were all going through the same thing. And then my friends who were outside of medicine couldn't really relate to what I was going through. So I felt like there weren't a lot of people I could talk to about what was happening. Going
through the same thing as in their day-to-day lives, not going through the same things burnout-wise, as far as you knew.
Well, as far as I knew, yeah. I mean,
you weren't sitting around the table talking to all the other residents about burnout.
No. I mean, people would talk about how they were exhausted and how they felt overwhelmed, but yeah, we didn't sit around and have like burnout, powwows. How burned out are you? Yeah, it's really bad.
Yeah. Interesting.
Just, and they had like employee assistants and they offered different things, but it wasn't like you really had a lot of time to do that.
Was that something, let me ask you that, was that something that the residency program stressed a lot? Or?
Yeah, I mean, they talked about it for sure. But it was also a well-known fact that first year was brutal. And it was just sort of like there was a light at the end of the tunnel and you just had to get there because the second and third years were entirely different. They were much more manageable.
Yeah. Suck it up, cupcake is the motto.
Basically, and that's true for a lot of residency programs. So it's not like it was something particularly unique, and burnout is rampant. It's an extremely common problem.
Sounds like a new shirt for me. Suck it up, cupcake.
I guess, but that's not, like, you can't, like, trademark that.
I don't need to trademark it. That's just a fun shirt.
Like, your
Premed, suck it up, cupcake. OChem, suck it up, cupcake.
Oh, dear.
Yeah, I like it.
Wow.
All right.
You got a t-shirt factory going.
Yeah. So what did you do?
I powered through. But I was pretty darn depressed. I mean, I remember periods where I would sleep. You asked what would I do on my time off? Like, I would stay in bed. I would sleep. I probably should have seen somebody to like talk about how I was doing and get help, but I didn't. I had never experienced this before. I didn't really know what was happening. And I just knew that I felt really bad. And it was kind of like, I didn't have time to sit around and feel sorry for myself other than when I was off. I just needed to get through it. And I was, dealing with trying to take care of really sick people. I didn't really have time to focus on myself. That's one of the problems, I think, is as medical students, as physicians, as particularly as residents, but it happens later too, that you're very focused on taking care of other people and sometimes to the detriment of your own health. And we've talked about that in the podcast before when I've talked about developing Crohn's disease and other assorted autoimmune problems. Your own health sometimes suffers because you don't prioritize it.
And I think as a pre-med, I don't know if you suffered through this as a pre-med too, maybe obviously not to the same extent, but it's all the same. You're not taking care of patients, but you're studying organic chemistry and physics and biology and chemistry and MCAT prep and OChem and biochem. And it's kind of the same. You're trying to power through it, and there's a light at the end of the tunnel. It's a grind. And you're sacrificing sleep and exercise and eating right. And so that's why I thought it'd be a good conversation to bring up today, just because students are going through this. It's not just physicians. And so...
And there's the added stress I would add too as a pre-med of this goal you're trying to achieve, and there's the very real possibility of rejection, and that's very stressful, I think, for many people, unless you're just, inherently brilliant and just ace everything you do. And
well, they're listening to this podcast.
Like Sheldon.
Sheldon from Big Bang. Right. Nice. Looking back at it now, you talked about talking to somebody like a psychologist, a therapist, whatever. What else could you have done? What else would you recommend for somebody that may be in those beginning stages of burnout? What would you recommend they do, or what should you have done to prevent the downward spiral?
I think decreasing the dose is an important thing. And
what do you mean by that?
Right. So it's hard. What I mean by that is sort of decreasing the amount of work, which you can't necessarily do, but if you can, it's good to do. So taking breaks is another way to sort of structure that. If you can decrease the amount of work that you have, you can't do that in residency. You can't really do that as a pre-med. You have a certain amount you have to learn, but structuring breaks so that you don't hit a wall and then feel like you're having to push through that wall and then hitting another wall. And so sort of breaking the cycle. So breaks are important. Exercise is really important. One of the things that I wasn't doing during that period was exercise, other than running around the hospital, which I don't know if that counts. And that's a problem. If you're not eating well, sleep is also huge. And sometimes I think people get nervous, stressed, burned out, and they don't sleep well. And if you're not sleeping well, it's terrible for your brain. It's terrible for your neurologic health. It does not help in terms of studying or learning, and it makes you feel more depressed. The other thing I've learned about depression is that it feeds on itself. And so it's hard to convince yourself that things can be okay when you're feeling really depressed. So I think taking breaks, exercising, eating well, but it's also really important to talk to somebody. And sometimes that may not be your friends or your family. That may really be a professional, somebody who can really help you through that with different strategies. It's a lot of things, but I think acknowledgement is the first thing. I think burnout, as rampant as it is, it's almost stigmatized in a sense too, because nobody really wants to have, a medical student or a physician hanging around a resident who's burned out. You have to be able to function. You have to do your job. So it's as much as we say to people, oh yeah, burnout's common, get help. If you start advertising the fact that you're really burned out, I don't think it's a welcome discussion for a lot of people. So going outside actually of where you are to get help, I think is important too. Does that make sense?
It does, but I don't agree with it.
Okay.
Because I think we need to break that stigma. And going outside is just continuing it.
Well, sure, but I'm just saying to get help. If you feel like, especially if you feel like you can't get the help that you need, or you feel embarrassed or something, don't let that get in the way of you getting help where you need to get help.
Correct. I would agree with that. If it's binary, you're either getting help or not getting help, then yes, go outside the system. Right. I would agree with that. And as a pre-med, there's this constant need for doing more, right? Of obviously getting great grades and doing the extracurriculars and getting the clinical experience and shadowing and curing cancer and whatever else that pre-meds obviously need to do these days to seemingly get into medical school. Did you feel that sort of pressure as a resident, that there was more to do, or was it just there was already a lot to do and that kind of was enough?
Yeah, I mean, there was always a lot to do. I think the pressure is that you're also expected to be reading, and there's really no time to do that when you're working 80 plus hours a week. So, but there was time to read later. And I figured that out. What really helped me in the end.
And we're not talking reading like Harry Potter.
No. Like there's an expectation that you need to read the material that you're also supposed to be practicing. So I needed to read neurology. And I didn't have the bandwidth to do that when I had time off. But what I wanted to do was sleep and take care of myself. So
you didn't sleep with the book on your head?
No. But I think the other piece is that if you're really going through burnout, it's really important to take a couple days off. If you're a pre-med and you're suffering and you're not sleeping and you're anxious, I think honestly giving yourself some respite, like taking a 2 to 3 day, like even taking a week if that's possible for you, and just taking a break from all of it, giving yourself a breath of fresh air. I think that's really, really important.
Yeah, very important. So for you, the pre-med, thinking about, you talked about decreasing the dose, right? And I asked you what that meant.
If you can, yeah.
As a pre-med, you can. You drop your classes, you take a semester off, you take a year off. That's okay. I would rather a pre-med that is on the verge of going through burnout and going through these issues. I'd rather look at their transcript and see a semester off than see a full semester worth of classes that have C's and D's because they were burnt out and couldn't handle it.
Absolutely.
So that's okay. If you're in that spot, take the time off.
Yeah.
Go volunteer somewhere. Go work with hospice. Go get a scribe job. Go do something. Get out of academics for a little bit. Recuperate and fix yourself.
And I think, yeah, in particular, what can help when you're a pre-med is actually getting time with patients, because as we've talked about before, that reminds you of why you're doing this in the first place. It's different when you're a resident and you're feeling kind of burned out. It's like you're already with patients.
No, that's a different why.
Yeah.
So it's instead of remembering why you're doing it as a pre-med, as a resident, you're cursing yourself. Like, why am I doing this?
Yeah. But yes, but as a pre-med, getting time with patients to really remind yourself of why you're doing that. That can help with you feeling refreshed and bringing yourself back to bear with it all.
Yeah.
It's tough. It's not easy. And I think everybody has their own personal path with that, but it's very common. So if you're feeling burned out, you're not alone, I'm sure. And it's a huge problem, for physicians. So it's something that if you're dealing with it as a pre-med, it's at the end of the tunnel, it's also still there. So it's something that if you get practice with learning to sort of prevent yourself from falling down the rabbit hole, it's a good thing to learn those skills early on, so that when you do get to be a neurologist or whatever you end up being, you have some practice in avoiding it. Neurology, as it turns out, is I think has the highest rate of burnout and the biggest job dissatisfaction of any field of medicine. And I think that has its assorted reasons, but I've been through some burnout as a practicing physician as well, and it's I had a recent episode of that, and again I had to look at these same things: decreasing the dose, getting help, talking with you, so leaning on friends and family a lot, and it's what you got to do, but. My goal now is, again, how do I prevent this from happening in the future? Because it's a potentially cyclical thing, and the job doesn't change. If anything, the demands in medicine just grow more and more all the time. So that's not going to change. So
darn patients.
People are going to get sick. That's part of being human. So how can you be able to withstand all of that? And so recently for me, that was decreasing my patient load a little bit, changing my schedule, and that helped enormously. And going and talking with someone, I'll be honest, I went to see a counselor and she helped me enormously. So, yeah. How's that for personal?
That's good. All right. All right. So I think that we'll end there. a short episode on burnout, personal. So listen to this. If you are feeling signs and symptoms of burnout, if you're not happy with what you're doing, it's okay to take a break. It is okay. Make sure you're eating right. Make sure you're exercising. Exercise has been shown over and over and over again to be the cure for everything. Yep. So exercise, exercise, exercise. Eat well, exercise, get sleep. And go talk to somebody if you need to. It'll protect your physical health. I mean, to be honest, I think that's where part of my, stress definitely can lead to autoimmune problems. It's a well-known deal. Yeah. So protect your physical health, take care of your mental and emotional health, and exercise so that you don't develop Crohn's disease and other assorted problems. And MS and other fun stuff. Oh, dear. All right. I'm sorry. Well, Allison, thank you for coming on. Thanks, everyone. All right. Let's end there. And if you would like to leave a rating and review, you can do so. medicalschoolhq.net/iTunes. I would love it. I would love for you to share this episode. If you know a friend that's going through some issues, share this episode with him or her. I would love it. And as always, I would love to see you next week here at the Premed Years and Med Ed Media.